I knew something was wrong the moment I saw Patricia Morrison's car pull up to my driveway at 7 in the morning on a Tuesday. She was the president of our Homeowners Association in Pinewood Estates, a suburban development just outside Charlotte, North Carolina, and she never showed up anywhere without an agenda. My name is Yannick Winters, and I had been living in this neighborhood for 3 years. I bought my 2-story colonial when I got promoted to senior project manager at my firm, thinking it would be the perfect place to settle down. The neighborhood looked pristine with its manicured lawns, identical mailboxes, and strict adherence to the HOA's extensive rulebook. Patricia made sure of that. I was pouring my second cup of coffee when the doorbell rang. Through the window, I could see Patricia standing on my porch, her blonde bob perfectly styled despite the early hour, wearing one of her trademark pastel cardigans. She had that look on her face, the one that said she was about to ruin someone's day. "Good morning, Yannick," she said when I opened the door, not waiting for an invitation before stepping inside. "I need to talk to you about your fence." "My fence?" I followed her gaze to the backyard, where I had installed a new privacy fence 2 weeks ago. I submitted the application form. It was approved. "Yes, but the paint color is weathered gray, not storm gray as specified in your approved application." She pulled out a folder from her oversized purse, flipping through pages with practiced efficiency. "This is a violation of Section 12, Subsection 4 of our community guidelines." I stared at her. "You're telling me there's a difference between weathered gray and storm gray?" "The difference is clearly stated in the paint chip samples attached to your approval form. You'll need to repaint it within 14 days, or face a fine of $50 per day until compliance is achieved." This was typical Patricia. In the 3 years I had lived here, she had cited residents for everything from grass being a 1/4 inch too tall to Christmas lights staying up past January 5th. She ran the HOA like a military operation, with her second-in-command Karen Whitley following close behind, enforcing rules with an almost religious fervor. "Fine," I said, too tired to argue at 7 in the morning. "I'll handle it." Patricia smiled, satisfied with my capitulation. "Wonderful. Also, just a reminder that HOA fees are due on the 1st. I noticed you paid on the 3rd last month, because the 1st was on a Sunday. The bylaws make no exception for weekends. Please ensure timely payment." She tucked her folder back into her purse and let herself out. I stood there, coffee growing cold in my hand, wondering for the 100th time why I had chosen to buy in an HOA neighborhood. My buddy Marcus had warned me. He lived in an older neighborhood with no HOA, where people could paint their houses purple if they wanted. But I had liked the uniformity, the property value protection that supposedly came with strict rules. Now I was regretting that decision. The fence incident was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, Patricia and Karen seemed to be on a rampage. My neighbor, Tom, got cited for parking his work van in his driveway overnight. The Johnsons 2 doors down received a violation notice for their daughter's pink bicycle being visible from the street. Even old Mrs. Chen, who had lived here since the development was built, got a warning about her flower garden extending 3 inches beyond the approved boundary. It was during the quarterly HOA meeting in early March that things started to get interesting. These meetings were usually sparsely attended, mostly just Patricia, Karen, the treasurer Bill Henderson, and a few residents who either had complaints or were being complained about. This time, Tom had convinced a bunch of us to show up and voice our concerns about the increasingly petty enforcement. The meeting was held in the community center, a small building near the neighborhood entrance that the HOA maintained for events. About 30 people showed up, which was unprecedented. Patricia looked annoyed the moment she walked in and saw the crowd. "Well, this is quite the turnout," she said, taking her place at the front table with Karen and Bill. "Let's begin with roll call and then move to old business." Tom stood up before she could continue. "Actually, Patricia, a lot of us are here because we want to discuss the enforcement policies. They're getting out of hand." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. Patricia's lips pressed into a thin line. "The rules are clearly stated in the bylaws that each of you signed when you purchased your property. If you have an issue with specific rules, you can submit a formal proposal for amendment, which will be reviewed by the board and put to a vote at the annual meeting." "The annual meeting is 7 months away," someone called out from the back. "Those are the procedures," Patricia said firmly. "Now, if we can move on to the budget report." Bill Henderson cleared his throat. He was a soft-spoken accountant who always looked uncomfortable at these meetings. "Yes. Well, the current balance in the operating account is $42,000. We've had some increased expenses this quarter due to landscaping repairs after that ice storm in January." I raised my hand. "What about the reserve account and the insurance policies?" Bill shuffled his papers. "The reserve account has approximately $38,000. As for insurance, Patricia handles those policies directly." Everyone looked at Patricia, who waved her hand dismissively. "All insurance matters are current and in order. We maintain comprehensive liability coverage for the common areas and a master policy that covers the community center and other HOA-owned property." Something about the way she said it bothered me, but I couldn't put my finger on why. The meeting continued with more complaints about violation notices, all of which Patricia deflected with references to bylaws and procedures. We left frustrated but not surprised. March turned into April, and the weather in North Carolina started warming up. The azaleas were blooming, and people were spending more time outside. That's when I started noticing that Patricia and Karen were having frequent closed-door meetings at the community center. I only knew because I had started jogging in the evenings, and my route took me past the building. One evening in late April, I saw Bill Henderson leaving the community center looking upset. He practically ran to his car, and even from a distance, I could see his hands shaking as he unlocked the door. That was odd enough that I mentioned it to Tom the next day. "Bill always looks nervous," Tom said. We were standing in his driveway, looking at the violation notice he had just received for having a small oil stain on his concrete. "But yeah, I've noticed Patricia and Karen have been acting weird. My wife saw them at the bank last week, and she said they looked like they were arguing." "About what?" "No idea, but knowing Patricia, probably something ridiculous. The weather forecast for the first week of May was predicting severe storms. This wasn't unusual for North Carolina in spring. We got warnings about possible tornadoes, heavy rain, and high winds. Most of us had lived through these storms before. You secured your outdoor furniture, checked your flashlights, and waited it out. The storm hit on May 6th. I was working from home that day, watching through my window as the sky turned an ominous green-gray. The wind picked up around 2 in the afternoon, bending trees at impossible angles. Rain came down in sheets, so thick I couldn't see across the street. Then I heard it, a sound like a freight train. I grabbed my phone and headed for the basement, my heart pounding. The whole house shook. Something crashed upstairs. The power went out. I sat in the darkness, listening to the world tear apart above me. When it finally stopped, maybe 20 minutes later, I cautiously made my way back upstairs. My living room window was shattered, rain pouring in. Part of my roof was missing. I could see sky through the ceiling in my bedroom, but I was alive and the structure was still standing. I stepped outside to assess the damage and froze. The neighborhood looked like a war zone. Trees were down everywhere. The Johnsons' house had a massive oak tree lying across their roof. Several houses had missing shingles or siding. The community center's roof was completely gone. Debris littered every yard, every street. People were emerging from their homes, stunned and surveying the destruction. Tom walked over, his face pale. "Holy hell, I've never seen it this bad. Is everyone okay?" I asked. "I think so. I saw the Johnsons get out. They're shaken but not hurt." Over the next hour, we went door to door, checking on everyone. Miraculously, no one was seriously injured, though Mrs. Chen had a cut on her arm from broken glass. The full extent of the damage became clearer as we looked around. 23 homes had significant damage. Roofs were the biggest issue, some missing entire sections, others with severe shingle damage that would lead to water damage if not addressed quickly. Several fences were destroyed. The Hendersons had a tree through their garage. "We need to call the HOA insurance," Tom said. "This is exactly what that master policy is for." That's when Patricia appeared, picking her way through the debris in the street. Her house, I noticed, had only minor damage, just some missing shingles. Karen was with her, holding an umbrella even though the rain had stopped. "This is terrible," Patricia said, looking around. "Absolutely terrible. Everyone needs to file claims with their homeowner's insurance immediately." "What about the HOA policy?" I asked. "Doesn't the master policy cover this kind of catastrophic damage to the community?" Patricia's expression flickered, just for a second, but I caught it. It was fear. "The HOA policy covers common areas and HOA-owned structures. Individual homes are the responsibility of individual homeowners." "But what about the community center?" someone asked. "And the entrance sign is completely destroyed." "Yes, those will be covered," Patricia said quickly. "I'll be contacting our insurance agent first thing tomorrow. Right now, everyone should focus on securing their homes and documenting damage for their personal claims." Something was off. I could feel it in my gut, the same feeling I got when a project at work was about to go sideways. But there were more immediate concerns. I spent the rest of the day covering my broken window with plywood and putting tarps over the holes in my roof. The next morning, I called my insurance company. That's when I got the first piece of bad news. My homeowner's policy had a deductible of $5,000, and the damage to my roof was estimated at around $12,000. I would be covering a significant portion myself. Other neighbors were making similar discoveries. The Johnsons were looking at $30,000 in damage. The Hendersons needed a new garage. "This is why we pay HOA fees," Tom said when a group of us gathered in his yard that evening. "The HOA is supposed to have insurance that provides an umbrella coverage." My buddy lives in an HOA in Raleigh, and when they had hail damage, the HOA policy kicked in to cover deductibles and additional costs. "We should ask to see the policy," I said. "We have a right to review HOA financial documents." The next day, I sent a formal email to Patricia requesting copies of the HOA insurance policies and the most recent financial statements. I CC'd the entire board and, for good measure, several other homeowners. Patricia's response came within an hour. "All HOA documents are available for review by appointment. Please submit a written request, and we will schedule a time for you to view documents at the community center during normal business hours." "Normal business hours for a volunteer HOA," Tom said when I showed him the email. "What the hell does that even mean?" I submitted the written request, sent via certified mail. While I waited, I started doing some research. North Carolina law was clear about HOA insurance requirements and homeowner rights to access financial records. I also started talking to other neighbors, really talking about the HOA finances. That's when I learned some interesting things. Bill Henderson, the treasurer, had resigned from the board 2 weeks before the storm. He had sent a brief email citing personal reasons. But his wife, Linda, let slip to another neighbor that Bill had been upset about something Patricia had done. I decided to talk to Bill directly. I found him one evening working in his damaged garage, clearing out debris. "Bill, can I ask you something?" He looked up, and I saw the same nervous expression I had seen that night at the community center. "If this is about HOA stuff, you need to talk to Patricia." "I'm trying to, but she's stonewalling me on the insurance information." "Bill, what's going on?" He set down the box he was holding and wiped his forehead. "I can't talk about it. People are losing thousands of dollars. If there's something wrong with the HOA insurance, we need to know." Bill was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he said, "Talk to the insurance agent directly." The HOA uses Piedmont Insurance Group. The agent's name is Robert Caldwell. That was all he would say, but it was enough. The next morning, I called Piedmont Insurance Group and asked to speak with Robert Caldwell. When he answered, I explained who I was and that I was calling about the Pinewood Estates HOA policy. "Ah, yes," he said. "I've been expecting calls. I'm very sorry about the situation." "What situation?" There was a pause. "You should really discuss this with your HOA president." "Mr. Caldwell, I'm a homeowner in this community, and I'm trying to understand our coverage. Can you at least confirm that there is an active policy?" Another pause, longer this time. "Sir, I'm not at liberty to discuss the details, but I can tell you that there is currently no active master policy for Pinewood Estates HOA." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean, no active policy?" "The policy lapsed due to non-payment. I sent multiple notices to the HOA president starting in September of last year. The policy was canceled in November." I did the math. September to May. 8 months. The HOA had been without insurance for 8 months. "Did you send these notices to Patricia Morrison?" "Yes, sir." Certified mail, email, and phone calls. I have documentation of all attempts to contact her regarding the lapse policy. I thanked him and hung up, my mind racing. Patricia had let the insurance lapse. She had been notified repeatedly. And she had said nothing, even after a catastrophic storm that damaged 23 homes. I immediately called Tom and told him what I had learned. His reaction was explosive. Within an hour, he had spread the word to everyone affected. By evening, there were 40 people gathered in Tom's yard, and the mood was angry. "She lied to us," someone said. "She stood right here after the storm and told us the HOA insurance would cover the community center." "We need to confront her," another voice called out. "This is fraud." "We need to be smart about this," I said, raising my voice to be heard. "We need documentation. We need to know where the insurance money went because we've been paying for that coverage in our HOA fees." A woman named Lisa Thompson, who was an attorney, spoke up. "Yannick is right. This could be embezzlement, fraud, or at minimum gross negligence. We need to request an emergency HOA meeting and demand a full financial audit." We drafted a petition that night, signed by 32 homeowners, demanding an emergency meeting within 7 days. We hand-delivered it to Patricia's house. She didn't answer the door, but I saw her curtain move. She was home. The meeting was scheduled for May 14th, exactly 1 week after we delivered the petition. The turnout was massive. Nearly every homeowner in the development showed up. Over 100 people crammed into what remained of the community center. Someone had set up a tarp over the missing roof section. Patricia arrived late, with Karen beside her. They both looked defiant, chins up, as they made their way to the front table. Bill Henderson was notably absent. "This meeting is out of order," Patricia began. "Proper procedures were not followed in calling this meeting." "Sit down, Patricia," Tom said. His voice was hard, and the anger in the room was palpable. "We followed exactly the procedures outlined in the bylaws. We have the required number of signatures, and we gave proper notice. Now answer the question. Why did you let our insurance lapse?" Patricia's face flushed red. "I don't appreciate your tone. Answer the question," someone yelled from the back. Lisa Thompson stood up. "Mrs. Morrison, I represent several homeowners who have been damaged by the recent storm. We have contacted Piedmont Insurance Group, and they have confirmed that the HOA master policy was canceled last November due to non-payment. Is this true?" Patricia looked at Karen, who was staring at her lap. No support coming from that corner. "There were budget constraints," Patricia finally said. "The insurance premium increased significantly when it came up for renewal. I made the decision to temporarily suspend the policy until we could build up the reserve fund." Temporarily suspend. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "For 8 months, and you didn't tell anyone." "I'm the president of this HOA, and I have the authority to make financial decisions in the best interest of the community." "Actually, you don't," Lisa said. "The bylaws clearly state that any expenditure over $5,000 or any change to existing insurance coverage requires a board vote. Did you bring this to a vote?" Silence. "Did you even tell the other board members?" Tom asked. "Bill knew," Patricia said defensively. "He's the treasurer." "Bill resigned," someone pointed out. "Why did he resign, Patricia?" Patricia stood up abruptly. "I don't have to sit here and be interrogated. I have devoted years of my time to this community, dealing with ungrateful residents who can't even follow simple rules about fence colors and lawn height. If you don't appreciate my leadership, then find someone else to do this thankless job." "Where did the insurance money go?" I asked, standing up. "We've been paying for insurance in our HOA fees. If you weren't paying the premiums, where did that money go?" Patricia grabbed her purse. "I'm done with this." "You're not going anywhere," Lisa said. "We're calling for an immediate vote to suspend you as HOA president pending a full financial audit." "All in favor?" A forest of hands went up. Nearly everyone in the room. "Motion carries," Lisa said. "Patricia Morrison, you are hereby suspended from your duties as HOA president. We are also voting to authorize an emergency audit of all HOA finances for the past 2 years. All in favor?" Again, nearly unanimous. Patricia's face went from red to purple. "This is illegal. You can't do this." "It's completely legal under the bylaws," Lisa said calmly. "You're welcome to stay and participate in selecting an interim president, or you can leave." Patricia stormed out, Karen scurrying after her. We spent the next 2 hours organizing. Lisa agreed to serve as interim president. Tom volunteered as interim treasurer. We authorized hiring a forensic accountant to review the HOA books, and we voted to retain an attorney to explore the community's legal options. The forensic accountant's report came back 3 weeks later, and it was worse than we thought. Patricia had been siphoning money from the HOA for almost 2 years. It started small, reimbursements for expenses that were questionable but not obviously fraudulent, dinners that were supposedly HOA meetings, office supplies that seemed excessive, but it had escalated. The insurance premium for the master policy had been $28,000 annually. Patricia had collected that money from the HOA fees but never paid the premium. Instead, she had used it for personal expenses. The accountant found charges to her credit card that had been paid with HOA funds, luxury purchases, a vacation to Hawaii, even payments for her daughter's college tuition. In total, She had embezzled over $65,000. "This is criminal," Lisa said at the emergency board meeting where the accountant presented his findings. "We need to go to the police." Some people were hesitant. Patricia had lived in the neighborhood for years. Her kids had grown up here, but the damage she had caused was real and extensive. 23 families were facing financial hardship because of her fraud. I was one of the people who voted to involve law enforcement. What Patricia had done wasn't just a civil matter. It was theft, fraud, and embezzlement. The Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department took our report seriously. A detective named Sarah Martinez was assigned to the case. She was thorough, reviewing all the documentation we provided, interviewing homeowners, and eventually obtaining a warrant for Patricia's financial records. The arrest happened on a Wednesday morning in early June. I was leaving for work when I saw the police cars pull up to Patricia's house. She was led out in handcuffs, still in her bathrobe, while neighbors watched from their windows and yards. Karen Whitley, who had apparently been involved in some of the fraudulent reimbursements, was arrested the same day at her workplace. The criminal case moved forward. Patricia was charged with embezzlement, fraud, and theft by deception. The prosecutor's office took it seriously because of the amount involved and the number of victims. Karen took a plea deal, agreeing to testify against Patricia in exchange for reduced charges. The trial happened that fall. I attended several days of testimony. Karen, looking nothing like the confident HOA enforcer I had known, testified that Patricia had convinced her the expenses were legitimate HOA business. She claimed not to know about the insurance policy lapse until after the storm. Bill Henderson also testified. He explained that he had discovered the insurance issue in April when he was preparing the quarterly financial report. Patricia had been hiding the canceled policy and had fabricated insurance payment records. When Bill confronted her, she had threatened to ruin his reputation in the neighborhood. He had resigned rather than become complicit in the cover-up, but he admitted he should have spoken up sooner. Patricia's defense tried to argue that the money was used for community purposes and that she had intended to pay it back. But the evidence was overwhelming. The Hawaii vacation, the personal shopping sprees, the college tuition payments, none of it benefited the community. The jury found her guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced her to 4 years in prison and ordered her to pay full restitution of $65,000, plus additional damages related to the insurance lapse. But the criminal conviction didn't solve the immediate problem for the 23 homeowners who had suffered storm damage. We didn't have HOA insurance, and Patricia's assets weren't nearly enough to cover the restitution, let alone the hundreds of thousands in damage to homes. Lisa, in her role as interim president, worked tirelessly to find solutions. We hired an attorney who specialized in HOA law. The attorney explained our options. We could try to sue Patricia civilly for damages beyond the criminal restitution, but she was going to prison and had limited assets. We could assess a special levy on all homeowners to rebuild the reserve fund and pay for repairs to common areas, but that wouldn't help the individuals with home damage. The attorney also explained that we might have a claim against Piedmont Insurance Group for not doing more to notify homeowners when the policy lapsed. After all, they had sent notices only to Patricia, who had a clear conflict of interest. That legal theory was a long shot, but we pursued it. Our attorney sent a letter to Piedmont Insurance Group explaining the situation and suggesting they had a duty to notify homeowners directly when the HOA president failed to respond to multiple notices about a lapsed policy. To our surprise, Piedmont's legal team responded with a settlement offer. They didn't admit fault, but they offered to reinstate coverage retroactive to the storm date if the HOA paid the lapsed premiums plus a penalty. It would cost us $45,000, which was more than our reserve fund could cover, but it would mean the storm damage would be covered. We called another community meeting to discuss the offer. The math was stark. If we accepted, we would need to assess each homeowner approximately $600 to cover the cost. But in exchange, the insurance would cover the storm damage, saving affected homeowners thousands or tens of thousands each. The vote was unanimous. We would accept the settlement. Each homeowner paid the special assessment. It was painful, especially for those of us who hadn't even had storm damage, but it was the right thing to do. We were a community, and communities take care of their own. The insurance claims were processed over the next few months. The Johnsons got their roof repaired. The Hendersons rebuilt their garage. My roof was fixed and my window replaced. The community center was rebuilt with a new roof, and the entrance sign was restored. By December, nearly a year after Patricia had first let the insurance lapse, things were finally getting back to normal. We held elections for a new permanent HOA board. Lisa was elected president by a landslide. Tom became treasurer. We elected 3 other residents who had been vocal about transparency and accountability. One of the first things the new board did was amend the bylaws. Now, any change to insurance coverage required not just a board vote, but approval by a majority of homeowners. Financial statements would be published monthly on a community website. Any expenditure over $1,000 required documented approval. And we instituted term limits for board positions, ensuring no one could consolidate power the way Patricia had. We also relaxed some of the more ridiculous rules. The fence color restrictions were eliminated. As long as your fence met basic safety and height requirements, you could paint it whatever color you wanted. The rules about visible toys and work vehicles were modified to be more reasonable. We were still an HOA, and we still had standards, but they were sensible standards designed to maintain property values without making everyone miserable. I painted my fence a nice cedar tone, and no one sent me a violation notice, Mrs. Chen expanded her garden, and it became one of the prettiest yards in the neighborhood. Tom parked his work van in his driveway, and the world didn't end. The experience changed our neighborhood in unexpected ways. We had community barbecues now, real ones where people actually talked to each other instead of just complaining about rules. We looked out for each other. When old Mr. Patterson had a fall and needed help with yard work while he recovered, neighbors volunteered without being asked. Patricia Morrison became a cautionary tale, not just in our neighborhood but in HOA communities throughout the Charlotte area. The local news covered the story extensively. HOA management companies used our case as an example of why oversight and transparency mattered. Some good came from the disaster. I ran into Bill Henderson at the grocery store one Saturday in January, more than a year after the storm. He looked healthier, less stressed. "How are you doing?" I asked. "Better," he said. "I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner. I should have gone to the homeowners the moment I found out about the insurance. You were in a tough position. Patricia was good at manipulation. Still, people could have been hurt in that storm. The fact that no one was seriously injured was just luck. If someone had died because we didn't have proper insurance coverage." He trailed off, shaking his head. "But no one did, and the situation is fixed now. We have good insurance, transparent finances, and a board that actually listens to residents. Thanks to people like you and Tom and Lisa who had the guts to stand up to her." I had never thought of it as courage. It just seemed like the right thing to do. When you see something wrong, you speak up. When someone in power abuses that power, you hold them accountable. Those weren't revolutionary concepts, just basic civic responsibility. The final chapter of the Patricia Morrison saga came in March, almost 2 years after the storm. She was released from prison after serving 18 months of her 4-year sentence. The terms of her parole required her to continue making restitution payments, though at her current income level, it would take her decades to pay back what she had stolen. She didn't return to Pinewood Estates. Her house had been sold to cover some of the restitution. A young family bought it, parents with 2 little kids who were excited to move into what they called their dream home. I met them when they moved in, helped them carry some boxes. "This seems like such a great neighborhood," the wife said, looking around at the tree-lined streets. "Everyone has been so welcoming." "It is a great neighborhood," I said. "We've had some challenges, but we work through them together." That was the truth. We had been tested in ways I never could have imagined when I first bought my house here. We had discovered that our HOA president was a criminal who had endangered all of us through her greed and deception. We had faced a natural disaster without the insurance coverage we had been paying for. We had been forced to come together, to take responsibility, to fix a broken system. And we had succeeded. The new family seemed nice. Their kids played in the yard while we unloaded their moving truck. Other neighbors came by to introduce themselves, to offer help, to welcome them to the community. This was what an HOA should be. Not a tool for petty tyrants to impose their will and line their pockets, but a genuine community organization that served the people who lived here. We maintained our common areas. We enforced reasonable rules that protected property values. We looked out for each other. Was it perfect? No. We still had disagreements about things like landscaping budgets and whether to resurface the tennis courts. But we handled those disagreements openly, with votes and discussions and compromise. We had learned our lesson about what happens when you let one person have too much power and too little oversight. I still live in Pinewood Estates. My fence is still the wrong shade of gray according to Patricia's old standards, but it looks great and no one cares. I serve on the Architectural Review Committee now, helping to approve or deny applications for home improvements. We try to be reasonable while maintaining standards. It's a balance, but it's a balance we work on together. Every year on May 6th, the anniversary of the storm, we have a community gathering. It started as a memorial of sorts, a way to remember what we went through. But it has evolved into a celebration of resilience, of community, of the fact that we survived and came out stronger. At this year's gathering, Lisa gave a speech. She talked about transparency, accountability, and the importance of active participation in community governance. She reminded everyone that HOAs only work when residents stay involved, ask questions, and hold leaders accountable. "We learned the hard way that trust without verification is dangerous," she said. Patricia Morrison was able to do what she did because we weren't paying attention. We assumed that because we paid our fees, everything was being handled properly. We learned that assumption can be costly. Tom spoke too, adding some levity to the serious topic. Also, we learned that fence colors really don't matter that much. My weathered gray fence and Yannick's storm gray fence somehow coexist without destroying property values. People laughed. It was funny now, though it hadn't been at the time. As the sun set and people started heading home, I walked through the neighborhood. The community center looked good with its new roof. The entrance sign was freshly painted. Lawns were green and well-maintained, but not with the obsessive uniformity Patricia had demanded. Some people had gardens. Some had basketball hoops. The Johnsons' daughter's pink bike was visible in their driveway, and the world continued to spin. this was home. Not because every house looked identical or because we all followed the same arbitrary rules, but because we had built something real here. We had faced a crisis together and emerged as an actual community rather than just a collection of houses with the same mailbox. The insurance is paid up, by the way. Lisa makes sure of that. We get quarterly reports showing proof of payment for all our policies. The reserve fund is healthy. The finances are posted online for anyone to review at any time. We have checks and balances, term limits, and mandatory audits. We also have a fraud prevention policy. No single person has access to HOA funds without dual authorization. All reimbursements require receipts and board approval. The treasurer position rotates every 2 years, and there's a transition audit each time. These might seem like common sense measures, and they are, but they're measures that many HOAs don't have in place. Patricia Morrison wasn't some criminal mastermind. She was an ordinary person who was given too much power and too little oversight. She started with small abuses and escalated when no one stopped her. By the time she let the insurance lapse, she was so deep in her fraud that she probably convinced herself she would figure out a way to fix it before anyone noticed. The storm made that impossible. 23 homes damaged, and suddenly, everyone was asking questions about insurance. She tried to bluff her way through it, but there are limits to what even the most confident liar can hide. I sometimes wonder if she regrets it. Sitting in prison, losing her home, her reputation, her freedom, did she wish she had just paid the insurance premium? Did she recognize that her petty tyranny and fraud had cost her everything? Maybe. Or maybe she still believes she was the victim, that ungrateful residents had turned on someone who was just trying to maintain standards. People have an amazing capacity for self-justification. But that's not my concern anymore. Patricia Morrison is in the past. Our community has moved forward. I'm sitting on my back porch now, looking at my fence in whatever gray it happens to be, drinking coffee and watching my neighbors live their lives. Tom is washing his work van in his driveway. Mrs. Chen is tending her expanded garden. The new family's kids are playing basketball. This is what Patricia never understood. Community isn't about rules and uniformity. It's about people. It's about working together, supporting each other, and yes, holding each other accountable when necessary. The HOA is a tool, nothing more. It can be used to enhance a community or to control and exploit it. The difference comes down to the people involved, their willingness to participate, and their insistence on transparency and accountability. We learned that lesson the hard way, through 8 months of lapsed insurance, a devastating storm, and the revelation that our HOA president was a criminal. 23 homeowners found out the hard way that trusting without verifying can be expensive and dangerous. But we also learned that communities can come together in crisis, that ordinary people can stand up to abuse of power, that systems can be fixed when enough people decide to fix them. Those are valuable lessons, even if the tuition was higher than any of us would have chosen to pay. So here I am, still in Pinewood Estates, still paying my HOA fees, still serving on committees and attending meetings. But now I pay attention. I ask questions. I verify. And I encourage my neighbors to do the same, because the next Patricia Morrison could be anywhere. In any HOA, any community organization, any position of trust. The best defense against fraud and abuse isn't just rules and audits, though those help. It's an engaged, informed community that refuses to look the other way. We didn't look away. When we discovered the truth, we acted. We involved law enforcement. We pursued justice. We fixed our systems. And we rebuilt our community to be stronger than it was before. That's the real ending to this story. Not Patricia Morrison going to prison, though she deserved that. Not even the insurance settlement and the repairs to our homes. The real ending is a community that learned to govern itself properly, to balance order with freedom, to maintain standards without tyranny. I like to think we got it right. The property values in Pinewood Estates have actually increased since we reformed the HOA. Turns out people like living in communities where the HOA is transparent, reasonable, and accountable. Who knew? Well, we know now. All of us, especially the 23 homeowners who watched the storm destroy their roofs while their HOA president's fraud left them unprotected. We know the value of insurance, the importance of oversight, and the cost of blind trust. We know, and we won't forget. Every time I see that fence of mine in its unauthorized shade of gray, I remember. Every time I pay my HOA fees and see the detailed financial report showing exactly where every dollar goes, I remember. Every time we gather as a community for a meeting or a barbecue or our annual storm anniversary, I remember. We found out the hard way, but at least we found out. Some communities never do. They live with their fraudulent HOA presidents and their lapsed insurance and their petty tyrannies until something far worse than a storm exposes the rot. We got lucky in that regard. The storm was bad, but it could have been worse. No one died. No one was seriously injured. The damage was fixable. And it exposed Patricia's crimes before she could steal even more or before an even bigger disaster hit. So maybe, in a strange way, that storm was a blessing. It destroyed roofs and fences and garages, but it saved our community. It forced us to look closely at our HOA, to discover the fraud, to fix our systems, and to come together as actual neighbors rather than just residents governed by the same arbitrary rules. Patricia Morrison let our insurance lapse for 8 months. Then a storm hit, and 23 homeowners found out the hard way. But those 23 homeowners, along with everyone else in Pinewood Estates, also found something else. The strength to demand accountability, the courage to face difficult truths, and the determination to build something better. That's the story I tell people when they ask about living in an HOA. Yes, there are rules. Yes, you pay fees. But if you stay involved, if you ask questions, if you hold your leaders accountable, an HOA can actually enhance your community rather than diminish it. Just never, ever assume that someone else is handling the important stuff. Trust, but verify. Participate, don't just pay. And if something seems wrong, speak up before a storm exposes just how wrong it really is. We learned that lesson. Hopefully, by sharing our story, other communities can learn it without having to pay the same price we did. Because Patricia Morrison isn't unique. The temptation to abuse power, to take what isn't yours, to lie and cover up rather than face consequences, that's universal. But so is the human capacity to come together, to demand justice, to fix broken systems, and to build genuine community. We proved that in Pinewood Estates. A year and a half after the storm, 3 years after Patricia let the insurance lapse, we're thriving. My fence still stands in its unauthorized gray. The storm damaged it, but we repaired it, and it's stronger now than it was before. Kind of like our community. That's the real lesson here. Storms come. Some are weather, some are human-made through greed and fraud. But what matters is how you rebuild afterward. Do you fix the surface damage and ignore the underlying problems? Or do you take the opportunity to build something better, something stronger, something more resilient? We chose the latter. It was harder, more expensive, and required more from all of us than just paying someone to fix our roofs. But it was worth it. I'm sitting here on my porch, coffee growing cold as the sun sets behind the trees, thinking about all of this. Thinking about Patricia and her petty rules and her criminal fraud. Thinking about the storm and the damage and the fear of financial ruin. Thinking about the community meetings and the votes and the decision to involve law enforcement. Thinking about the trial and the conviction and the reforms we implemented. Mostly, though, I'm thinking about my neighbors. Tom, who rallied people to fight back against the abuse. Lisa, who stepped up to lead when we needed her. Bill, who eventually found the courage to tell the truth. Mrs. Chen, who just wanted to grow her flowers in peace. The Johnsons, the Hendersons, and all the others who suffered damage but came together to find solutions. These are good people. This is a good community. We had a bad HOA president who did terrible things, but we dealt with it. We didn't ignore it, excuse it, or accept it. We confronted it, fixed it, and moved forward. That's what I would want people to know about our story. Not just that HOAs can be corrupt or that you should always verify your insurance coverage, though both those things are true and important. But that communities have power when they choose to use it. That ordinary people can stand up to fraud and abuse. That systems can change when enough people demand change. Patricia Morrison is in prison. Our insurance is paid. Our homes are repaired. Our HOA is reformed. Life goes on in Pinewood Estates, better than before because we learned these lessons. The storm hit, and 23 homeowners found out the hard way that their HOA had let the insurance lapse for 8 months. But we all found out something more important, that we had the power to make things right, to demand accountability, and to build the kind of community we wanted to live in. That power doesn't come from HOA bylaws or insurance policies or elected presidents. It comes from people who care enough to pay attention, ask questions, and take action when something is wrong. We are those people. And Pinewood Estates is our home, more so now than ever before. The coffee is cold and the sun has set. Tomorrow, I'll probably get an email about the next HOA meeting. There will be discussions about landscaping contracts and tennis court repairs, and maybe some new resident with a question about fence colors. It will all be transparent, documented, and accountable. Because we learned the hard way, and we're never going back to the way things were before. That's the story of how our HOA let the insurance lapse for 8 months. How a storm hit and 23 homeowners found out the hard way, and how we came together to demand justice, reform our systems, and build a real community. It's not the story I expected to tell when I bought my house in Pinewood Estates, but it's the story that needed to be told. And maybe, just maybe, it will help someone else recognize the warning signs before their Patricia Morrison causes the same kind of damage. Stay involved. Ask questions. Verify. And never assume that someone else is protecting your interests when you can protect them yourself. That's the hard lesson we learned, and it's one we'll never forget.